Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Missing Manual. I'm Julia.
And I'm JCK.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about design thinking. And I had a really interesting call earlier. It was a networking conversation, a recruiter that's out of work, and I'm seeing if I can help him network and find another opportunity. But in part of the conversation, he was talking to me about an organization that he worked with that was leaving one ATS and moving to another, but the people that were running the project did not have IT's involvement. So the information security team was not at all involved in anything to do with this huge applicant tracking system implementation. And no surprise, it was a massive failure. And it just made me think about the things that you need to do to prepare when you're going on a big journey like that, especially when there's significant technical implications to it. And JCK, I would love to hear your thoughts because you really do bring a design thinking principle to work that you do and projects that you're working on, and would love to hear from you how you would have approached this situation a little differently.
Yeah. So probably important to ground ourselves with. Design thinking is the scientific process of being able to understand a problem and then reverse engineer your approach to how you solve that problem. One thing about me, I lost my memory in 2020. And when I came back into the working world or back into the world that we live in today, design thinking was like my basics or my foundation. So being able to, again, ask those sharp questions, figure out what that problem was, and then reverse engineer your strategy for how to solve it. It's sometimes a little bit more technical, but that's just how I'm wired, right? And so as it relates, though, to something like an applicant tracking system, right? So we're typically in that situation, we're taking an existing piece of technology and sometimes we're ripping and replacing it, or sometimes we're just putting one in out of the gates, right? So I think with design thinking, it really starts with understanding what is the actual problem at hand. And so a lot of people will jump to, oh, we just need to check the box. We need to take out the old technology and put in the new technology. But there's a lot more that's involved with this.
As you go through this, you had a post on LinkedIn talking about how you applied it to something very personal, not very personal, but in a personal situation that I loved reading about, and I think would be a great example to show it doesn't have to be an applicant tracking system.
I am a part of a group here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota called Diverse Daisies, and it's a nonprofit that is committed to giving girls from all different backgrounds unique experiences. One of my great friends, Jess Von Bank, she runs this nonprofit and it does amazing things here in the community. My girls, I have an almost 18-year-old and an 8-year-old, have been involved with this group. So getting into our event last week, I had reached out to Jess to say, hey, do you need any help? And she said, yeah, can you research local pizza shops? Because we want to give the business to, like somebody who's local, if anybody's followed what's been going on here in Minnesota, to like making sure to support some of our small business owners as well, because life has been a little bit crazy here in the Twin Cities or in Minneapolis. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then it, again, paused for a second and I caught myself, I was like, wait a minute, we're talking about like young to teenage girls. We could pick a cute, fancy pizza place, but chances are they're not going to eat it, right? And so I was like, well, maybe I'll do some sort of like board or something where the girls can vote on what type of pizza they want and then we can just order what they like, right? So instead of assuming that we are going to order the right things, again, being able to ask the question and allow your audience, in this case, these girls, to be able to self-select what they'd like to eat. And so Jess is like, love that idea. That's great. And then I went back to my normal working day because this isn't our main jobs, right? And so as I was sitting there and wrapping up the day, I realized, you know what? Yeah, and I'm a big whiteboarder. I always have a whiteboard marker in my pocket because I always like to be able to draw out the problem that I'm working at or working through. And I have lots and lots of whiteboards in my garage. But anyways, so I was like, I could very easily go and just put this thing together. But the purpose of this group is actually to help enable girls, right? And to help them learn. And so I was like, what if I create a design challenge so that the girls can take this concept and then they can make the solution. And we had, in our situation, we had like a 35-minute drive up to this Ninja Warrior studio where we were having this event. And so I jumped on ChatGPT, I gave it the situation, the grounding, and it created this design pizza challenge. And so what this starts with is the mission. Create a fun, clear way for all girls to tell you what pizza they want, and then use that information to plan the order. So your supplies, you have a blank whiteboard, multiple markers, and you must design everything. And so it walked them step by step through. First, they had to design the voting board, and there were some pieces here, reminders, like it should have a clear title, instructions for what to do, places to vote for pizza types, cute decorations or colors, and then the girls were going to fill it in when they arrived. We also had like a dietary or special needs request piece, because it's important when you're designing something to not design for the rule, but to design for the exception, and making sure that people who might not fit your traditional box, like somebody who's gluten-free or maybe can't have meat, or dairy-free, right, has an option to be able to note those things. So that existed there. And then there was a part on pizza math, so teaching the girls about like, okay, so one medium pizza has about 8 slices. Each girl will eat between 2 and 3 slices. And so it gave them all the steps that they needed in order to go in this problem. And then what I did is essentially they got in the car. I gave them the supplies, they each had a little clipboard with pens in it and the instructions, and their job was to build it. And then I let them do it, right? It was fun. So my kids go to STEM schools, so science, technology, engineering, and math. So they're taught the design thinking process starting in pre-K. And so they understand how to like unpack the problem and then how to build a solution. And that, first you have a proof of concept, then you're building it out more, right? Like it's something that they're familiar with. But it was so fun to sit there in the car, I'm jamming out to music, and I'm hearing the girls back and forth. This is an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old essentially building their strategy. And so it was so fun, Julia. Then we got about 5 minutes away, and I challenged them to what my boss always calls Coco Chanelling it, or taking off 2 things that might not be helpful or might be unclear, right? And so they removed some different pictures and they really cleaned it up. But all this to say, I'm getting into monologue mode, but instead of just doing it for them, I gave them an opportunity for them to build the strategy themselves. And then I gave them some of those reminders on the different steps during the process of how to make sure that their strategy was going to accomplish what they wanted to.
That's awesome. And I think if someone is listening and you're a leader and you've got people on your team that haven't gone through situations and things, this is a perfect example of how you can set some clear instructions or directions, but still give people the room to run a project and get the work done within some guardrails.
Yes.
How would you apply this to the applicant tracking system or system change or implementation?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think it's a similar process, right? Where we understand what the problem is, and then we need to understand who are our different users or personas who are going to interact with the situation. And in like using the pizza example, the people that we had were the people who were helping to plan. We had the girls, right? We had the girls who were going to eat the food. We had the pizza store, right? Like there's and then we had the parents. Like there's a couple different, personas. There's not as many. But when we're talking about an applicant tracking system, that's very, very different. You are going to have people who are maybe in a field, or in the field where they don't have access to a desktop computer. You are going to have hiring managers who are going to need to be involved in some sort of process of this. You're going to have candidates, right? So being able to first map who are the people who interact with the situation. And then you have to map who are the leaders or people involved to help you be able to get this across the finish line. Who do I have to talk to? Who do I have to influence? Those are all important pieces as well. And so it's less about similar to, I guess, the pizza example, it's less about me getting my idea for the finish line or to the finish line. It's about us getting the collective idea to the finish line, right? And that's definitely the same case when it comes to an applicant tracking system where you're going through some sort of implementation. It's not about my way. It's about the right way that's going to work for everybody who's involved. And it's really important to get those pieces of feedback as well. IT being a very, very, very important lens, right? Because I'm pretty technically savvy, but I'm going to tell you, I would never run a project where I didn't have my IT counterparts involved, right? Where I didn't have my HR counterparts involved. Because if you've done the work and you've been able to isolate and identify those personas of who who's important to this, then you've got to make sure that they have some sort of stakeholder participation, or that you're
Well,
bringing them along in the journey.
and I think you need to understand your personas and do that upfront design work, but you also have to do the back end work, because a system as robust as an applicant tracking system has a lot of different data connections and downstream implications that you as a practitioner may not even be aware of if you're not in a TA operations role or an HRIS role or an IT role. You have no clue what goes on behind the scenes, and it's usually much more complex and a lot more, I was going to say, thinking of like a plate of spaghetti in some organizations I've been at. It is much more entangled than you may ever imagine. And that is like missing IT in that kind of technology situation. It's going to fail every time if you don't have IT, information security, finance. There's so many people behind the scenes that a project like an applicant tracking system that need to be involved and aligned in order for it to be a success beyond the candidate, hiring manager, and the business.
100%, 100%. Because there's things that you might not be aware of, like especially like legal, right? Like there's things like GDPR, there's things about PII specifically, personally identifiable information, that we start to play with some of these systems. And sometimes we need to make sure that those systems are closed loops. And that they adhere to things like the right to forget, right? Like if you don't have a partnership with your IT and legal teams, you might design something that's not compliant, and then it's opening up your organization to risk, which is ultimately not what we want to do. So another really, really important thing for running a project like this is making sure that you're doing a pre-mortem and a post-mortem. So pre-mortem is, what are all of the different ways where this could potentially go wrong? And usually you want to bring the people who are close to this project together and pose that question. And this is about being able to collect the dots, not being able to evaluate the dots. And so just being able to put out all the different ideas that are in there. So one of those ideas could be like, we might screw up from an IT standpoint, or we might open ourselves up to risk, right? We might build something that's not mobily compliant, right? If I have a large population of candidates who access, my application on their phone, and my application process, it's only desktop enabled, we've got a problem, right? But being able to pose those questions on the front end, collect those dots, and then we want to work through like, how can we mitigate against those proactively? And that really helps us to build an effective strategy. What are your thoughts on that, Julia?
In a previous life, we knew that we needed the mobile solution, but one of the challenges with it is in one of the countries that we operated, people don't use their data plans, they use WhatsApp, and the technology we had purchased did not have the capabilities for WhatsApp. So we had a whole country of people that were going to struggle a little more going through our application process, which at the time was very manual in that country due to tech limitations. And so things like that always come up, and you don't always catch things up front, but I think going through some design thinking can help you approach it and at least capture as much as you can. There's always going to be a surprise. JCK, if someone wants to learn more about design thinking and how to bring some of those principles in their day-to-day work, do you have podcasts or books or some suggested reading?
This book, Cad Monkeys, Dinosaur Babies, and T-Shaped People, Inside the World of Design Thinking and How It Can Spark Creativity and Innovation, is a great book. Also, anything from the IDEO School of Design, which is Stanford's design thinking school, is phenomenal. Highly recommend that as well. We're actually doing a book club, or I'm leading a book club in the month of April. I think it starts at the end of this month. It's on the book called The Friction Project, which is also about design thinking and problem solving. And this is free for anybody to join if you'd like to. But there's a lot of different things out there. And the other thing is, you can, if you're working with an LLM or AI, feel free to also say like, hey, I'm interested in this concept of design thinking. I've heard that Stanford D School has some interesting resources or viewpoints on this topic. Can you help me build a strategy for being able to go deep and wide in this topic? Or like, what are some areas that I should consider?
We can leave some links in the comments as well to the book and things like that. So we'll put some content in the contents for people. So I think that's it for this episode of the Missing Manual. So if you enjoyed our conversation, please support us, subscribe, like, leave a comment. Jenny, any last words for today?
I'm proud of you. You've got a lot of decisions you can make, and you chose to step into this content and to sharpen your skills, and that says a lot about you. So I'm proud of you, and keep continuing to add to your professional tool belt and sharpen those tools that are there. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone.